Warning, this video contains intense scenes of horror, suspense, and disturbing imagery that may not be suitable for children under 13. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Some stories are so chilling, so unexplainable, they cling to you like a shadow long after the lights go out. Tonight, we'll uncover 3 terrifying stories, accounts of horror and the unknown that will haunt your dreams. But be warned, not all nightmares end when you wake up. Are you ready? Story 1. The Crying Baby. It was a quiet Tuesday when I moved into my new apartment in the city. The building was old, but it had charm, and I loved the view from the 3rd floor window. I hadn't had time to unpack fully, but I figured I'd take a break and relax. That was when I first heard it, the faint sound of a baby crying. At first, I thought it was coming from a neighboring apartment. But as the hours passed, the crying grew louder and closer, almost as if it were coming from within the walls. I tried to ignore it. After all, it was just a sound, right? But the cries persisted. Night after night, it became unbearable. I would lie awake in bed, the sound echoing in the corners of my mind. No matter how many times I checked, there was no baby in the apartment. No neighbors with infants either. The crying didn't stop. In fact, it grew worse. It would begin around midnight and last until dawn, each night more frantic and desperate. I started asking the other tenants about it, but no one seemed to hear it. Some of them even laughed it off. I couldn't take it anymore. One night, in a fit of frustration, I followed the sound. It led me to the small closet in the corner of my living room. My hands shook as I turned the handle, and the crying immediately stopped. Inside, the closet was empty, except for a dusty old crib. It was as though it had been there for decades, untouched. But that wasn't the worst part. In the mirror on the back of the door, I saw a figure, pale, gaunt, a woman with hollow eyes holding an empty baby blanket. I left the apartment the next morning and never looked back. Story 2. The Phone Call from the Dead. It started with a single voicemail. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a missed call from my mom. Strange, I had just spoken to her that morning. I pressed play on the message, expecting some mundane reminder. But the voice that spoke wasn't hers. It was garbled, distant, layered with static. At first, I thought it was a bad connection, but then I heard my name, spoken in a voice I hadn't heard in years. It was my grandmother's voice. She had been dead for over a decade. I felt sick, my hands shaking as I replayed the message over and over. It was faint, but it sounded like she was singing her favorite song. That night, I called my mom, asking if she had tried to reach me. She hadn't. But what she said next made my blood run cold. That afternoon, she had found an old cassette recording of my grandmother singing. She had been listening to it when I got the call. I deleted the voicemail, but even now, some nights, my phone rings. No caller ID, no voicemail left. Just static. Story 3. The Locked Door. I moved into my new apartment a few months ago, and at first, everything seemed perfect. The rent was cheap, the neighbors were friendly, and the building had an old-world charm. But there was one thing about the place that never sat right with me. I was told I could use the basement, but to stay away from one particular room in it. It was strange. The door was locked. It didn't look like a regular storage room or utility closet. It had an old-fashioned keyhole, worn and scratched from years of use, but there was no key. The door looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. At first, I didn't think much of it. Every building has its oddities, but the more time I spent in that apartment, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I started hearing strange noises at night, creaking footsteps that seemed to come from the direction of the basement. I tried to ignore it, but the sounds grew louder, as if someone were pacing back and forth behind that door. One night, I couldn't stand it any longer. I went down to the basement, heart pounding in my chest. The door was still locked, but I could hear something, someone, moving inside. I pressed my ear to the cold wood, trying to make out the sound, and that's when it happened. A voice, soft and faint but unmistakable, whispered through the cracks in the door. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It wasn't human. I ran out of that basement so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. The next day, I did some research and found something disturbing. Years ago, a tenant had gone missing from the building. No one knew where they went. The police had searched, but the only thing they found was the locked door, which hadn't been opened in years. I've moved out now, but I still hear that whisper sometimes in my dreams calling me back. Some mysteries defy explanation, leaving us questioning what's real and what lies beyond. If these stories left you with goosebumps, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to A Twisted Mind. New horrors await you every week, so hit that bell icon and join us, if you dare. Sleep tight.